Michael Irons, Worlds Old and New, by Nathan Moore. Chapter 7, Deep Green. To Michael Irons, the vast green-choked waterways of the bayou were as foreign as any place he had ever traveled. The thick, hot, heavy humidity clung to him with undeterred aggression, causing his black clothes to perpetually adhere to his wolfish form. It was a novel misery of both ravenous rot and chaotic abundance, a vivacious and voracious environment always eager to reclaim any and all man-made encroachments. But since Michael Irons had been forged within hells made by men, the harsh environments of the earth in comparison seemed to be, at worst, modestly miserable purgatories. Thus it was that, after days of travel and his consequential acclimation to the bayou, Irons found himself marveling upon the primal beauty contained within the vast swamp's monstrous scope. For a beautiful monster the bayou was, as luscious and unforgiving as the python's scales or the shark's jaws. She persisted with insensitive disregard, a single-minded viciousness, a purity of inevitability mankind had long since forgotten. But of course, the savageness of nature was not what had first drawn Michael Irons into the vast bogs. As was his wont, regardless of locale, Irons sought and pursued rumors of evil. The bayou was abundant with these, of course, but with his discerning ear, Irons began to sift through drunken rumor and wild supposition, separating over-exaggeration from consistent elements. Further footwork saw him wade through sleight-of-hand witch doctors and brimstone puritans, until over time he began to familiarize himself with the New World's brand of paganism. There were plenty of true practitioners, but what solid symptoms he found did not support a recent incursion, mortal or otherwise, leading Irons to wonder if what he sought preceded any community or tribe. It seemed what he sought was older. Thus, Irons found himself knelt within a canoe, the shallow draft ideal for this environment, allowing the Englishman to make his way deep into the waterways of the bayou. Ahead, the trees began to grow thick again, a sign of somewhat stable ground. As he approached, Irons saw that around and away from the clustered trees were arrayed carefully crafted fetishes. Most were woven about crow skulls and alligator teeth, but some carried an entire alligator skull, or even the occasional human finger bone or lower jaw. These markers, easily noticed, were arrayed to both the left and right, impressing upon Irons the notion of a boundary, and he knew a ward when he saw one, meaning, despite their fearsome appearance, their most fundamental purpose was to ensure something stayed within. Michael Irons let his cold blue eyes drift leftward, as he had been informed there was indeed a cabin built upon poles, allowing it to remain suspended above the murky water in a very tenuous manner. The planks of the small single-room abode seemed well-weathered, near black with rot and waterlog, with great clumps of vibrant green moss scattered about thickly and hanging heavily. Once he stood on the dock, Irons felt certain the tread of his black boots had sunk near 2 centimeters into the untrustworthy wood. He mindfully placed his feet upon segments near the purported support struts, then, for lack of confidence in the dock and for not knowing precisely what kind of madman would make this place home, Irons called out, "Good day!" "Is that the king's good English these old ears hear?" came a reply more ready than Irons had expected. The voice which emerged from the sodden dwelling was a low, smooth tenor, the kind of voice Irons often heard over backroom dealings involving ill-gained coin. And while Irons' own tones were often cold, the chill in this honeyed voice was a quiet and subtle thing, like a northern coastline hiding ravenous riptides. On instinct, Irons became wary. "It is," he replied with bold declaration. "I had hoped to inquire regarding the local wards, and what manner of creature is kept within." "Ah," came an expression of appreciation rather than surprise. "We have had hunters come, yes, but not many discern the ring's foremost purpose." The cold blue eyes of Irons peered up from under the wide brim of his black hat, glancing towards the unseen speaker. And what became of these hunters? Wondered Irons. Those who did not understand entered and would not return, while those who understood did not enter, instead turning back and remained alive, smiled the voice. I am disinclined to turn back, Irons decided. But you are inclined to understand, hence you speak with me, the voice countered deftly. And should we speak on the nature of what resides within yon ring, you too will gain satisfaction and decide to turn away. Then let us speak. What resides within the ring? Irons inquired. An ancient thing, was the suddenly unconvivial voice, the last and the least of a forgotten and nameless breed. He was alone before our progenitors could speak, and he has been dying since the first word of our race was written. The words of Irons emerged almost as if from a script. What is he? I know not, came the honest reply. To us he is large and sometimes hungry, and as is often the case of aged things, he sees poorly, and is usually, if not always, confused. Should not such an animal be put from his misery? Were we able? The voice shrugged, sounding genuinely sorrowful. But many hunters have tried, all have failed, their infinitesimal life force serving only to prolong his miserable time to senselessly haunt this world. Life force? Then he is not a vampire, a wendigo, an eater, or any of the myriad other things you and I know occupy the unseen dark. He simply remains. Irons was reminded of the difference between knowing and understanding. I believe I understand, he nodded finally. I will leave him be. May I perhaps at least see him? Perhaps, the voice agreed. The moon will be near full tonight and the sky clear. It will be as good a chance as any. Come, I will employ you to catch us dinner. The inside of the shack shared the same thick atmosphere typical of enclosures within a sufficiently humid environment. It was a dark, tight, single-room space holding little more than a cot and a small oven, alongside which was moss and waterlogged driftwood, set near to be better dried. A functional if somewhat risky arrangement, thought Irons, but the old man clearly managed well enough. As for the elevated hut's inhabitant himself, no information was forthcoming from the stooped elder, nor did he ask the name of his tall, terse guest. While slowed from advanced age, the wizened old man seemed able enough, wearing short pants so often patched they likely held no original fibers. A sleeveless sackcloth shirt, which was stained with sweat and bleached with age, still somehow stubbornly held form upon his bent and withered torso, while his rough and weathered feet did not seem to have touched shoe or sock for years, perhaps even decades. Strangest of all, around the man's eyes was wrapped a thick bandage of once white linen. Despite this impediment, the man moved about his abode without aid, faults, or hesitation, grabbing up a net and fishing line and thrusting these towards Irons for the purpose of catching catfish, further directing the guests to also drop the crayfish trap. Whether for respect or internal contemplation, Irons remained silent and did as he was bidden, fishing and drawing success enough to form a modest meal for two. The old man boiled the crayfish and cooked the catfish, the result being Irons' best meal since he had left the old world. They ate in silence. Dusk grew darker. How long has it been since you last saw England? Wondered Irons. The old man smiled. It is not in the nature of a taciturn man to invite conversation. He roughly chuckled through yellow and crooked teeth. And since I have not seen much at all in some time, your true question is rather easily ascertained. You are not blind, remarked Irons. Then, when the old forehead raised bemused, he continued, I have had comrades who are stricken blind. No matter how well an adjustment, movements become forever altered, manifesting in a specific manner of exploration with the fingers, even in their own homes. My eyes serve no use. Irons was not satisfied with this evasive reply, but the old man flatly refused further discussion and enlisted Irons' aid with the cleaning. After this, they adjourned outside and watched the last light fade. The old man sat in his chair and enjoyed a pipe, while Irons crouched on the stoop and wondered in silence at the utter lack of mosquitoes. After a time, the near full moon began its slow rise into the cloudless night, large and bright. When it began to touch the Milky Way's silver swath, the old man put out his pipe and leaned back in his chair. If he is to appear, it will be now. Both men sat very still in the celestially illuminated dark. For a long while there was nothing, and then, when there was something, Irons did not notice for a few moments, because for something so large, it made disturbingly little sound. It was not a movement in the tight trees of the grove or the flight of a disturbed waterfowl to draw the eyes. Rather, the creature simply moved into view from Irons' left with near-perfect silence through the water, walking on two great legs that seemed both in size and appearance to be as the trunks of oak trees. The form of the beast rose into what Irons approximated to be a squat stomach region with a broad torso stacked upon it, while hillock-like shoulders were hunched high, between which was nestled a small head, most strikingly resembling the shape of a pear or olive. Peering all but featureless from the hairy, mossy, lichen-encrusted head stared twin, lidless eyes so dark they stood out even among the shadowed mass, their darkly luminous depths seemingly absent of focus or purpose, like a dream walker. His arms bore little resemblance to arms, giving way at what would be an elbow, splitting into a loose amalgam of vine-like tentacles. There were perhaps 10 great vines of each arm, and all seemed to move in small, thoughtless, directionless patterns. From these, dozens of other lesser vines draped about like tentacles of a jellyfish, reaching down into the dark waters, moving about in slow, purposed motions, jerking about on occasion. Now and again, a large vine would rise into the area below the head before draping itself back into the swamp once more, and Irons assumed the beast to be feeding. The creature seemed to stand 30 feet tall, but it was impossible to know the size of its legs and how much of them were hidden beneath the bayou's brackish water. For almost 15 minutes, the creature moved at a steady, silent, ponderous pace, neither speeding up nor slowing down, continuing in a gently curved trajectory, one which Irons noticed kept him inside the arrayed fetishes. With a near absence of ripples in the water, the beast seemed to drift by, the bayou neither louder nor more quiet for his passing. And with the same lack of ceremony in his appearance, so too did he disappear behind the trees to the right. For some time neither man said anything. Then the old man stood, muttering something about bed. As he was about to enter his home, he paused. "Before sunup, I trust you will be gone." Having already begun to consider departure, Irons nodded. Despite his hidden eyes, the old man seemed to know what motion Irons had made. Or perhaps he knew Irons had only one answer to give. The black-clad vagabond was left to gaze upward, alone, watching the moon swim slowly across the sea of stars, to ponder and reflect.